Climate change. It's a hot button issue in politics, scientific communities, and now in everyday conversation. On a global scale, sea level rise has accelerated, glaciers are melting, and the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased. But it's also affecting us in the Midwest right now in ways we can see and feel. Data shows since the start of the 20th century, Illinois' climate has gotten warmer and wetter. So we're diving into how climate change is impacting us every day and what's being done about it, starting with allergy season. For allergy sufferers, this year has been particularly difficult, a trend that's likely to continue.
I've been dealing with allergies for roughly 30 years. I have seasonal allergies, hay fever, a little bit of dog issues, that's new, but mostly seasonal allergies.
What triggers your symptoms mostly?
The changing of the seasons. Fall and spring are really rough for me. Stuffed up nose, and then conversely sneezing, constantly runny, eyes, itchy eyes, kind of debilitating.
Have you noticed it more when there's a warmer winter and or an earlier spring? Have you noticed those effects?
For sure. If there's not, I sometimes am begging for the first frost. I can't wait for that to come to kind of kill some of the stuff that's going on. My allergy season has stretched out through the whole year versus just a season of fall and a season in spring, a couple months each. It's pretty much year long.
I'm a board-certified allergist and immunologist who is also the head of the Loyola pollen count. I've been doing the pollen count on my own for 5 years, but total of 11. The pollen count is a measure of how much pollen is in the air at a given amount of time. Every morning we go up to the roof and there's a machine that's called the Burkhardt spore counter. This is a machine that we put in a slide that's coated with silicone. This slide slowly moves up every 15 seconds and it sucks air that's kind of floating around and collects the pollen on this slide. After 24 hours, I go up and I collect that slide. We stain it, and then I look at it under the microscope and count how much pollen is there. Spring and fall are generally considered the worst allergy season. Spring is sometimes tricky because we don't really know when winter is going to end, but typically that's mid-March until really the beginning of June. The spring has been very strange this year. This year it seems that it started early, but it's been a kind of a slow and gradual type of tree season. We'll probably see that the spring is extended.
With a warming climate, the allergy seasons are getting longer.
Yes. Now, what happens if these seasons extend is that the symptoms just are expressed for longer periods. And so instead of tree season lasting from March until the beginning of May, we're talking about starting in February and going on until mid-June or July. That increases how much medicine people need to use. It also increases risk of infections. If there's more inflammation and congestion, you're more at risk to get sinus infections and just affecting quality of life.
Are you seeing more patients?
Yeah, I would say this season has been pretty intense and it's been long. So the first people that noticed like the itching in the nose started in like mid-February, and it is definitely continuing on now. The factors that impact it are CO2 levels, temperatures, and other pollution that can affect the trees and grass and other things that are growing.
Do you see that trend sticking around with the unpredictability of the weather and our warming climate? And are you concerned long term that more people will develop allergies?
Unfortunately, I do think with these changes in the environment that we're going to see more and more allergy sufferers and people who are developing allergies as well. I think we're going to see changes in the type of allergens that we experience.
The shorter winter and then seems like the longer springs, it's been hard for me. I hear people talking about allergies now much more than we ever did.
A warmer than normal winter is music to many ears. Avoiding snow-covered commutes in a polar vortex is traditionally celebrated. But winter recreation is big business, a $12.2 billion industry in the U.S., according to one report. And a lack of snow means tough questions for some businesses in Illinois.
We're usually open for a typical season 65 to 70 days. This year we're open for 31 days. That has not happened in probably 2 or 3 winters. So we've definitely noticed that we're opening up later and later.
Because it's too warm?
Because it's too warm. We have 5 different runs. Right now we're standing on our run number 5, which interestingly enough, this past ski season was only the second time in 60 years we've been in business that we were not even able to open up this run. We never had enough snow. We can make our own snow, but the weather, temperature, humidity has to be just right. Has to be below like 31 degrees. Humidity has to be low. The wind's got to be right. So it makes it difficult.
My name is Trent Ford. I'm the Illinois State climatologist based at the University of Illinois.
How much warmer is Chicago, Illinois now than it was, say, 50, 100 years ago?
Yeah, so compared to about 100 years ago, the average winter temperature is about 1.5 to 2 degrees warmer than it was, which is actually pretty significant. There's a benefit to that. And certainly with climate change, there are aspects of good or benefits in it. One of those is a decreased exposure to cold for folks in the city and around the area. One of the issues with the very coldest temperatures increasing the fastest is that those coldest conditions are often one of the largest determinants of the range of species of plants and animals. So one of the biggest kind of chronic impacts we're seeing from climate change is the advent of these species of animals, perhaps pests in some cases, both for agriculture and for humans, that we really haven't dealt with in the same number or the same frequency that we have before. One of the best examples is the Gulf Coast tick. It spreads a number of diseases that are harmful for humans, that are more like chronic diseases. Now, when we look at projections of those ticks, it continues that trend because winter warming is projected to continue into the next few decades. So vector-borne disease, whether through ticks or mosquitoes, is one of the major concerns of a warmer and wetter Illinois into the future.
Should recreation facilities be concerned long-term about this changing winter forecast?
Looking forward, if you are somebody who banks on winter recreation that deals with snow in northern Illinois, yeah, the prognosis isn't great. Like you mentioned, snow is highly variable from year to year. So in the next 20, 30 years, there's likely we're going to have some big snow years, but they're becoming fewer and fewer. And that baseline snow is also dropping, meaning that there's fewer days that ski or snowmobiling or sledding operations can open.
So you've noticed the last couple of the seasons seemingly getting shorter. How would that impact you long term if the season got too short? I mean, would there be a point it just wouldn't be worth it to open at all?
My boss and myself, we've talked about it a number of times, especially this past season, that yeah, I mean, if it gets much worse than it was this year, we're going to have to think about maybe doing something else. And it's sad to say that because this place has been around for over 60 years. We have adults from all over come out here and say, yeah, I learned how to ski here 40 years ago. So it's like I said earlier, it's a big family. So I hope it never gets to that. But you know, with the weather that we had this past winter, who knows? I'm just hoping next winter will be a lot better.
Is Tornado Alley shifting east? That region is loosely defined as the central U.S., where tornadoes are most frequent. Think Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. But this year, Illinois leads the nation in tornadoes. Climate change is expected to shift storm tracks, not necessarily increase the number of storms, but could make dangerous events more frequent and tougher to predict.
I love extreme weather. So a lot of us go outside and pull up the umbrella, right? But I like it when when nature's at its worst. This year, Illinois leads the country in the number of tornado reports. Generally, this time of the year it would be Texas and Oklahoma, but we saw a number of extreme weather events, including tornadoes in March and in portions of early April. Extreme weather can happen, of course, any time of the year, but we do see a kind of a lengthening in some of these projections of severe weather seasons, starting earlier and kind of lasting longer and later into the season. Fundamentally, number one is increasing temperature allows the air to hold more water vapor content. You put gasoline in your car, if you want to create a thunderstorm, one of the things that you need is this instability component. And so in a future climate that is warmer and more humid, we basically have more fuel for these types of thunderstorms. In the future, the projection is really that these events are going to become more intense and more frequent. And so if we have more of these types of systems, our infrastructure that we've relied on for hundreds of years may not be supportive of that type of rainfall input, for example. The major takeaway, though, is this variability component. We're moving into a climate state that is not normal anymore. We can't focus on specific areas of Tornado Alley, are we in or are we out? The reality is we can get tornadoes here in Chicago, and we have a long history of them happening.
Yeah. Do you expect more in the future?
Oh, absolutely. It's a matter of time until Chicago is hit by a significant tornado, not a matter of if. Our biggest threat here from extreme weather in Chicago is to have another playing field event. If you were to take that tornado that happened and just same track, same event, but you do it instead of 1990, you do it in 2023, it impacts 10 times as many people because of the population expansion.
The glass shattered and noise, this bad explosion, it just horrible.
Everything we own's gone.
Thought I was gonna die.
For those of us that were here, and even for a lot of people who moved here, it's still a seminal event in this town's history.
The population has increased so much. If that same tornado were to happen today,
It would be devastating because, you know, a lot of it out west was just going through blank farmland. So there's thousands of homes out there that now. Sorry, I get emotional all the time. It does quite a bit. It's like,
why is that?
Like I said, I think it's just people, their willingness to come out and help. And people just would descend on neighborhoods. There's a million stories, like a million stories of crazy things. The entire grain elevator and everything was ripped out. We had huge trees snapped in half. It took us over a week to clean everything up. It was such a mess.
What do you know about the systems that were in place in 1990 to warn people about severe storms?
Well, the technology obviously was a lot more antiquated than it is today. Prior to becoming a volunteer captain with Plainfield Emergency Management, I was the police chief here in Plainfield for 11 years, and I also was the director of the Emergency Management Agency during that time as well. We've progressed so much more with our volunteer network and our networking with the National Weather Service. It definitely sparked change in the technology that was out there at the time, on a local level and through the National Weather Service on a federal level. We had, I believe, just one tornado siren in the town at that time. Now there's 12 or 13. We're standing in our new facility that's, we're still putting more infrastructure in here, but we will have a complete communications room. We'll be able to monitor radar, weather radar, through various sources. When this building was being designed, we specifically wanted to make sure that we had a tornado shelter. Our tornado shelter is got concrete walls a couple feet thick that should stand up against a very violent tornado. When there's a tornado warning issued, not only can our dispatch center set off the sirens, but we also have a secondary location that we have the capability to set those sirens off. I would put us up against any emergency management agency in the state of Illinois.
That's really what climate change is doing. It's augmenting and changing the probability that we're going to get these types of extreme events in the future. It will continue unless we do something to mitigate, right? And that's what maybe fears me and keeps me up at night, is exactly how hard can we push that climate system before it starts to push back even harder.
Illinois is one of the top food-producing states in the country. We rely on farmers to fill our dinner tables and our gas tanks. But climate change is impacting the way they work, sometimes for the better. Warmer, frost-free days mean longer growing seasons. But too much or too little rain can bring on numerous challenges. And farmers are forced to adapt.
I've been farming since about 2001. Well, I guess you would consider to be the third generation.
Okay, let's go.
Here we go. We are planting corn on a farm near Route 47 north of Elburn, Illinois. These screens are all here monitoring the seeding operation and the fertilizer operation.
When you hear someone say climate change, do you feel the effects of that?
So we may be getting the same moisture over the course of a year, but it's coming in more intense episodes. And so we do need to manage things like that. This, for example, this field has not been tilled. And one reason I like that is because all the cracks and all the wormholes are here and they're there. And when it rains, you know, this farm, in theory, could be able to take those more severe rain events more gracefully. There are drawbacks, right? Now we have to spray more chemicals to kill the weeds that the tillage would have done. Everything we do is a trade-off. 2019 was the horrible wet year where we didn't plant, I don't know, half our corn crop. That had never happened before. And yeah, it just got so late that we just, at some point, you just cry uncle and say, there's just not enough time for that plant to do what it needs to do.
What does that do for your bottom line?
It's pretty tough.
What would you say is the biggest weather event impacting farmers?
Excess heat and you know, maybe insufficient moisture. If you have a hot, dry spell in July and early August, you know, you can't recover from that. We put in drain tile to try to take the water subsurface rather than letting it just wash across the surface and create all this erosion that we're still trying to kind of work through. Nitrogen is, well, it's two things. It's expensive, it's necessary to grow a corn crop, but it also can end up in the water if we put on excessive amounts. We are constantly trying to tweak not only our application techniques, but also our application quantities to put on just enough. The efficiency is just wildly better than it was when I was growing up. Just because we have the technology and the knowledge and the information, and we can make better decisions. We have better equipment, and that's one way we're trying to, I guess, manage around not only the cost of nitrogen, but a severe weather event that would or could potentially wash too much of it away.
it doesn't benefit a farmer to either over apply or apply at the wrong time. So they're very careful in how they're managing their fertilizer and also their pesticide products. But they're looking at their tillage practices, making sure that soil stays where it's at. We're actually at this period of time where we're seeing historic levels of funding, particularly out of the federal government, to really help farmers take on all of these practices. It truly is cost share. So practically a farmer would go into a county office for the USDA and they would say, I'm interested in a program that would help me offset my input cost on, say, cover crops. They would then file out the paperwork and then they would get probably close to 50%, 70% of that cost match from the federal government. There has always more interest in those practices and those programs here in the state of Illinois than there is money to go around. So that's a good problem.
Sometimes it feels like farmers get a bad rap for being the cause of all these problems, this and that, and pollution and erosion and all that. And I think the reality is most of us are trying to do a good job and probably do a good job. By and large, farmers make their living off the soil. So why wouldn't we take care of it?
Solving the climate crisis won't happen overnight, and it can feel overwhelming to think about the short and long-term consequences. But there is action being taken to reduce emissions and mitigate the effects on everyday people. Coming up in part 2 of Global Climate Local Impact, we'll take you to several Illinois cities where climate solutions are underway right now. For NBC Chicago, I'm Kate Chappell. Thank you so much for watching.